Galaxy called it the Great Stabilization, a 1,000-year span under the rule of the Imperial Directorate. Hundreds of species had risen and been crushed under a single doctrine. Resistance must be answered with the breaking of their young. The policy was as old as the Empire itself, tested on dozens of worlds, perfected to suppress rebellion with ruthless efficiency. When populations fought back, their children were targeted first. Entire lineages were erased, entire schools vaporized, entire nurseries burned under the Directorate seal. No species had ever withstood it. Those who defied the Empire always bent, always begged, always accepted the terms of surrender after the first generation was culled. Fear was the most reliable instrument of governance, and no one in power questioned its precision. The first human colonies encountered by the Directorate existed on the galactic fringe. Isolated settlements, lightly defended, slow to communicate with one another. The Imperial surveyors documented their structures, their population sizes, their industrial capacities, and issued the standard report. Technologically young, strategically insignificant, easily subdued. What alarmed the analysts was not their weaponry, but their refusal to acknowledge Imperial authority at all. No petitions for membership, no oaths of loyalty, no concessions offered. They did not even respond to threats. To the Directorate, this was nothing new. Many species had displayed primitive pride before. The solution was always the same. Strike the children first. Watch the resistance collapse. The culling began on Meridian 4, a mid-sized human colony. The Directorate deployed one planetary suppression ship. Casualties: 60,000 civilians in the first orbital strike, nearly half of them under the age of 10. Surveillance drones recorded everything for broadcast. To Imperial citizens, this was a routine enforcement action. To the human colonies, it was an unprovoked slaughter. Within 2 weeks, identical operations were carried out on Horizon Belt, Farpoint Station, and the twin moons of Damaris. Total confirmed dead, 380,000. Directorate analysts concluded the population would sue for peace within months. It was a statistical certainty. No species had ever tolerated the killing of its young without immediate capitulation. But humans did not send emissaries. They did not transmit a plea for mercy. No governors approached the Directorate with terms of surrender. Instead, entire settlements went silent. Colonies abandoned open infrastructure, stripped spaceports of recognizable markings, erased digital footprints. Communication lines between human worlds went dark. Instead of panic, there was preparation. Initial Imperial patrols reported unusual resistance. Search teams disappeared in asteroid belts. Frigates sent to collect prisoners failed to return. In 3 separate cases, entire reconnaissance squadrons were destroyed without a trace of weapons fire on Imperial logs. Directorate investigators concluded that humans had either obtained stealth technology from a third party or were engineering it themselves. Probes showed rapid construction of underground facilities. Children were seen drilling with weapons, supervised by adults who appeared neither fearful nor broken. A memorandum circulated among Imperial command. Projected timeline for human capitulation must be revised. Civilian morale is not degrading as expected. Countermeasures require escalation. The Empire escalated without hesitation. Cities were bombarded from orbit. Agricultural centers were sterilized to induce famine. Refugee ships were tracked and destroyed. Human death tolls crossed 1.2 million within the first year of contact. Yet there were no mass surrenders, no delegations, no submissive broadcasts. Instead, Directorate outposts began to vanish. Mining stations in human-adjacent sectors were destroyed by unknown assailants. Convoys supplying suppression fleets disappeared. A single human raiding force infiltrated the Sharon shipyard, an installation guarded by Imperial dreadnoughts, and obliterated it with captured explosives. No survivors were left to explain how the perimeter was breached. Directorate cultural analysts submitted increasingly urgent warnings. Human behavioral models diverged from established sentient norms. Standard coercion strategies ineffective. Loss of civilian life produces increased resistance, not reduced resistance. Generational trauma creating soldiers rather than pacified populations. Recommend alternative policy. High Command rejected the recommendation. They had broken 37 intelligent species before. Humans would be no different. The second year of suppression was worse. The Empire targeted medical facilities, resource depots, even water treatment plants. Any infrastructure supporting human life was systematically destroyed. The toll climbed to 4.8 million. Still, the species did not plead. Human broadcasts contained no request for negotiations, only silence punctuated by intercepted signals indicating accelerated weapons research. Imperial scouts documented primitive but rapidly improving shipyards carved into the crust of uncharted moons. Portable foundries produced munitions at impossible speeds. Children apprenticed in weapons design, fabrication, and field repair. Entire family units became combat cells. No one asked for Imperial permission to live. By the third year, human attacks grew coordinated. Entire sectors of Imperial space reported ambush fleets. A single human strike wing annihilated the escort of the Tyrannies, a flagship previously considered untouchable. Directorate reports recorded the use of improvised weapons with unprecedented effectiveness. Salvaged Imperial equipment was being repurposed and improved. Every engagement revealed humans learning faster than projections could account for. Meanwhile, human populations did not dwindle as predicted. Birth rates spiked despite ongoing massacres. Entire generations were being raised under fire, trained to fight from the moment they could walk. Psychological warfare failed. Broadcast threats, which had cowed dozens of species before, only hardened human resolve. Propaganda footage showing murdered children was intercepted by humans and turned inward, not to inspire fear but fury. Each atrocity became a recruiting poster. Every Imperial strike produced 1,000 volunteers for vengeance. The largest suppression fleet in Directorate history crossed the human frontier, expecting a final victory. 1,000 capital ships, 2,000 escorts, 4 million ground troops, and logistical support to sustain operations for decades. The plan was simple: overwhelm human resistance through sheer scale, burn every settlement, kill every survivor. Historical precedent guaranteed success. No species had survived this level of sustained Imperial attention. Yet the humans did not meet the fleet head-on. They dispersed, hid, and refused battle on Imperial terms. For 6 months the fleet advanced unopposed, destroying what appeared to be empty worlds, uninhabited cities, abandoned mining complexes. High Command declared progress. In reality, the fleet was chasing shadows while humanity prepared for total war. Underground shipyards spread across asteroid fields, disguised by rock and radiation shielding, churn out warships faster than analysts believed possible. Using salvaged components from destroyed Imperial craft and reverse-engineered systems, humans built vessels optimized for asymmetrical strikes rather than traditional fleet engagements. Every destroyed human settlement yielded survivors relocated to secret bastions, where entire populations became engineers, technicians, and soldiers. No one was exempt. Children were taught weapons handling alongside arithmetic. Entire generations now considered combat a normal state of existence. Humanity no longer spoke of peace. It spoke only of victory. Industrial output accelerated beyond all projections. Human war factories, mobile and concealed, could be dismantled and relocated in days to avoid detection. Agricultural production shifted underground, using hydroponics to sustain populations in siege conditions. Energy grids were decentralized. No target, no matter how thoroughly destroyed, ever crippled the whole. Human infrastructure became impossible to eliminate because it existed everywhere and nowhere, built in layers beneath rock and ice, spread across drifting colonies of hollowed planetoids. The Directorate misread the silence. Believing humanity to be disorganized and weak, they intensified their attacks. But every strike only honed human strategy. Raids on Imperial convoys became routine. Entire supply lines disappeared. Human fleets did not linger after combat. They hit, killed, vanished. Drones recorded Imperial wreckage strip clean of technology, engines dissected and repurposed within weeks. Captured Imperial officers reported systematic questioning by human strategists, not for propaganda, but for technical data. Everything learned was immediately weaponized. A doctrine emerged among human forces. No negotiation until victory. War was no longer a reaction to imperial aggression. It became a deliberate, calculated campaign. The humans developed weapons designed specifically to counter Directorate strengths. Armor-piercing rail weapons bypass Imperial shields. Pulse torpedoes disable command vessels without warning. Stealth drives based on scavenged Imperial tech allowed human ships to appear and disappear at will. They abandoned fleet formations in favor of dispersed cells coordinated by encrypted communications no Imperial decryption array could penetrate. Every small unit could act independently, and every unit fought with lethal efficiency. Allies materialized from unexpected quarters. Neighboring species, long subjugated by the Empire, began supplying humans with raw materials, intelligence, and safe harbors. Not out of friendship, but fear. The Empire's brutality terrified the galaxy, but the human refusal to bow inspired cautious hope. Merchants smuggled weapon components. Scientists offered data on Imperial weaknesses. The Directorate knew foreign aid was flowing, but could not stop it without risking mass revolt among its own subjects. The Imperial fleet, once invincible, now faced an enemy that would not engage where expected. Human attacks came from asteroid belts, from dead moons, from orbiting debris fields. Reconnaissance ships never returned. The kill ratio continued to shift. What had been Imperial dominance now became parity, then began to tilt. For every human craft destroyed, 2 Imperial ships went down. For every settlement burned, a Directorate fuel depot or shipyard vanished. Admirals demanded reinforcements twice the size of the original suppression armada, but even these reinforcements only provided more targets. In less than 3 years, humanity transformed into a species at war in every sense. Civilian and military distinctions dissolved. Children grew up in flight suits, learning orbital mechanics alongside survival training. Weapons were not issued to soldiers. They were part of daily life. War was not an interruption of society. War was society. Recruitment was no longer necessary because every human was already a combatant in some capacity. Entire communities designed ships, programmed drones, produced munitions. Casualty lists that would have broken other species only stiffened human resolve. Where fear had shattered other civilizations, fury forged humanity into something new. Imperial High Command finally recognized the scale of the threat when human fleets stopped running. Instead of avoiding major engagements, humans began striking Imperial fortresses directly. The first assault targeted the bastion of Aurelian, a planetary stronghold protected by orbital fortifications and a defensive fleet of 200 ships. The bastion fell in less than 6 days. Human forces bypassed its planetary shields, infiltrated its defensive grid using captured access codes, and detonated its power cores within. The destruction was absolute, leaving no survivors. Imperial command staff realized that humanity no longer fought defensively. It was now prosecuting a war of conquest. Intelligence reports confirmed that humans had mapped the Directorate's entire frontier infrastructure. No patrol route, no shipyard, no logistical hub remained secret. Imperial fleets stationed at distant worlds began to mutiny when ordered to suppress human colonies, fearing inevitable retribution. Alien mercenaries refused Imperial contracts after watching humans dismantle professional fleets with terrifying precision. The Empire's analysts were baffled by humanity's speed of advancement. In less than 5 years of open conflict, humans had compressed centuries of technological progress. They turned captured weapons into prototypes, prototypes into production models, and production models into war fleets with impossible efficiency. No bureaucracy slowed them. No tradition constrained them. Every disaster became a lesson, every defeat a test bed. By the time the Directorate understood what was happening, humanity had already surpassed several Imperial technologies. When Imperial governors recommended peace, the Directorate rejected the notion outright. To concede would mean admitting weakness to the entire galaxy. But humanity was no longer interested in negotiation. The slaughter of its children had burned diplomacy out of existence. Human broadcasts contained no ultimatums, no threats, no messages of peace. They sent only silence, followed by destruction. Human fleets no longer harassed Imperial patrols. They hunted them. Every engagement ended with Directorate vessels burning in silence. Human war doctrine matured into a science of annihilation. Strike without warning, overwhelm without hesitation, leave nothing intact. Where Imperial ships clung to rigid formations, human squadrons operated as swarms, autonomous, unpredictable, and coordinated through encrypted networks the Empire could not penetrate. They did not fight to hold territory. They fought to erase enemies. The Directorate still clung to its arrogance. Orders were issued to assemble an ultimate battle group, a last weapon to halt the human advance. The fleet comprised 2,000 capital ships, command carriers, and dreadnoughts armed with experimental superweapons. It never reached its objective. Before the fleet could leave dock, sabotage teams infiltrated its logistics hubs. Human operatives disabled fuel depots, hacked navigational relays, and triggered catastrophic detonations in shipyards. Over half the fleet was destroyed on the ground. Those at launch were intercepted before they could regroup, dismantled in deep space by human task forces whose ships moved faster and struck harder than anything the Empire had encountered. Imperial propaganda collapsed. Once proud citizens who had cheered the culling of alien children now whispered to the humans, not as rebels, but as executioners. Worlds loyal to the Empire barricaded their skies, fearing not invasion but judgment. Neighboring species openly defected to humanity's side, providing safe harbors, raw materials, and intelligence. They had learned that human vengeance was not indiscriminate. It was surgical. Those who had not taken part in the slaughter were spared. Those who had ordered it, carried it out, or profited from it vanished without trace. Assassinations gutted the Directorate's leadership. The architect of the child-culling protocol, the admirals, the governors, the overseers, were hunted down one by one. None died quickly. Human precision strikes eliminated entire command chains in hours, often before replacements could be appointed. In some cases, human operatives bypassed planetary defenses entirely, appearing in the private chambers of senior officials, leaving only scorched symbols of vengeance on the walls. The Empire's most feared enforcers were dragged from hiding and executed without ceremony. Entire sectors of Imperial space collapsed in chaos. Mutinies erupted among Directorate fleets ordered to fight to the last. Crews sabotaged their own ships rather than face human retaliation. Some surrendered outright, begging for terms, only to find that humanity offered no negotiations. The time for diplomacy had ended with the first murdered child. Now there was only retribution. Human fleets swept forward in coordinated offensives that crippled Imperial infrastructure. Hyperlane hubs were seized or destroyed. Communication arrays were jammed or captured. Every planet known to house Directorate command posts was systematically invaded. Ground resistance proved futile. Human soldiers, civilians only years before, advanced with discipline and precision unmatched by any professional army in Imperial history. Cities that resisted were neutralized block by block. Those that surrendered were spared unnecessary destruction. But every individual associated with atrocities was executed on the spot. Humanity did not conquer for resources or glory. Humanity conquered to make certain that the killers of children would never kill again. The core worlds of the Directorate, untouched by war for centuries, now faced blockades. Fleets appeared in orbit without warning, bypassing defensive lines with stealth drives and warp jump precision. Imperial defenders, unaccustomed to battle on their own doorsteps, collapsed under relentless assault. The great shipyards of Carthan Prime, once symbols of Imperial dominance, were turned into slag in a single night. Orbital stations above the capital world burned for days, raining wreckage onto the cities below. The Emperor's Council dispatched envoys to plead for peace, promising reform, reparations, and amnesty. Humanity did not answer. No transmissions were returned, no envoys acknowledged. Human broadcasts remained silent, broken only by terse warnings to evacuate civilians before attacks commenced. The Empire begged for mercy from a species that had believed incapable of resistance. That belief died with every world that fell. One by one, Directorate fleets were annihilated. Command ships that once cowed entire systems were hunted like prey. Human admirals pursued them into uncharted sectors, never resting, never relenting. In space battles, Imperial officers noted with horror that humans no longer celebrated victories or broadcast propaganda. They recorded enemy losses only as data and immediately plotted the next strike. War was no longer emotional. It was a process. Within 2 years of full-scale counteroffensive, the Directorate ceased to function as a government. Its central command fragmented into isolated factions. Some worlds declared independence. Others swore allegiance to humanity, and still others hid in fear of retribution. But humanity's campaign was not about political control. It was about erasure of the old order. Every surviving architect of the child massacres was hunted down. Every fleet that enforced their will was reduced to drifting debris. The imperial capital itself fell, without a final battle. By the time human forces arrived, the ruling council had fled, abandoning their own people. What remained of the Directorate's defenses were shattered in a single day. Orbital bombardments silenced weapons platforms, and precision raids eliminated remaining command centers. The human fleet did not destroy indiscriminately. It targeted the instruments of tyranny and left the cities intact for civilians to reclaim. The message was clear. Humanity fought only those responsible. With the Directorate dissolved, humanity did not establish an empire. They left no governors, no rulers, only warnings carved into the ruins of former palaces. This is what becomes of those who murder our young. Neighboring civilizations recorded the events with awe and terror. For the first time in galactic history, a species had risen not only to defy the Empire, but to dismantle it entirely. Trade networks realigned around human-controlled space. Freed species offered humanity alliances, not out of gratitude, but out of respect and fear. Even those who had once doubted humanity's strength now understood the truth. Humans could not be broken by terror. Where others bowed, humanity sharpened its blades. Where others submitted to save their children, humanity transformed its children into warriors and avengers. The final casualty tallies shocked the galaxy. Imperial losses numbered in the tens of millions. Fleets reduced to wreckage. Fortresses vaporized. Entire ruling classes wiped out. Human losses remained high. But instead of weakening their resolve, each death deepened their unity. A race that had once been considered technologically primitive now commanded fleets rivaling anything the galaxy had seen. Their technology, born of desperation and refined by war, exceeded that of any long-established power. With no central authority left to oppose them, humanity withdrew its fleets from occupied territories, leaving self-governing systems behind. But they left warnings too, engraved on the ruins of Directorate fortresses, broadcast on every channel.